and welcome to the webinar. My name is Hannah Dyson from Enfield Voices and GlobalNet 21, and this is one of the webinars that we do each week, exploring local, national and international issues. And today's webinar is called A Tidal Wave of Change, Flexibility in the Workplace and Widening Participation in Politics. And this evening we are speaking to Clare De Silva. I'm very glad to say that she is here to speak about this very important topic. Clare is a Conservative councillor for Bushell Park. Widening participation in politics is something Clare is very passionate about and believes that the option of working remotely can widen access to all kinds of jobs and careers, ensuring the best possible pool of talent. So tonight's webinar, we're just going to be exploring how we can widen the participation in politics in different areas of our lives and in society. So hi Clare.
Hello.
Welcome to the webinar. Could you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. And thank you very much for having me on this evening. This is fantastic. So obviously I'm a councillor in Bushell Park. I was elected 2.5 years ago now. Before I was a councillor, I've spent most of my career working in charities and social enterprises, often kind of in the heart of really challenging communities. And so being involved with my local community, wanting to make things a bit better for some of the most marginalised people, that's always been kind of where I've come from and the things I'm interested in. But when I became a councillor, I campaigned really hard to become a councillor. I really wanted to become a councillor, but on the night of the count, as I was watching those ballots add up, it wasn't looking very promising. And to the extent that many of my friends kept coming up to me and saying, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter. I didn't get elected on my first go either. I really, during the night, it just seemed to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I thought, well, that's it. You know, I tried, I had to go, maybe this isn't for me. And in the last kind of hour of counting, the ballots began to change. And by a whisker, I was elected. And I can tell you there was nobody more shocked than me that I actually won. Yeah. And it really struck me that politics can be quite a fragile thing. You're in, you're out. Your career and what you're doing is dependent on what other people think about you. It's unlike anything else. And I realised how fragile it was. And so I kind of made a bit of a promise to myself that I was going to make the most of the opportunity, because I've no idea how long it's going to last. So I want to do the best I can and make the most of it while I'm there. And one of the things I wanted to do was to be a really good councillor and serve my residents well. And I hope I do. But the other thing is I thought, do you know what? I want to enable more people to be able to do this too, because I'm not sure we always have the best pool of the best people, local level and national level. And actually on my own, I can do a certain amount. But actually, if I can bring other people with me and enable other people, then no matter how long or short a time I've got in this game, the things that we're doing, the changes we can make, can carry on. And so widening participation and getting people involved has been kind of at the core of what I've done the whole way through. So I'm a 50-50 Parliament mentor, so interested in helping other women enter into parliamentary politics, and I have a little cohort of mentees who are starting their journey in that direction. I've been supported by organisations like Women to Win, which is the Conservative movement for getting more women elected at all levels. And I also have done quite a bit of work sort of in schools and going around and just demystifying politics and saying, you know, I can do it. Quite frankly, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And sort of enabling people to see that actually this is a really useful, it's a challenging environment to be in, and it can be a harsh environment to be in, but actually it's a really rewarding and it should be open to everyone. So that's kind of where I've come from. And right now, the interesting thing, which I think started our discussion, Hannah, was that we've had so many changes to how we've worked during this phase. It feels like we're at a unique opportunity to have a proper think about what kind of society do we want, what kind of economy we want, and what kind of politics we want. So that's the kind of basis for coming on and having a chat tonight. And it would be really interesting to kind of explore those and how we can take forward some of the good stuff in this horrible crisis, and learn something as we move on.
Okay, yeah. So wow, that's a lot there to think about. And I mean, since April, in April 2020, MPs can now participate in debates in Parliament, both physically and virtually. And this allows up to 120 of the 650 MPs to take part in the proceedings at once using the Zoom video conferencing app, while up to 50 will sit in the Commons. Why do you think that's important for the future of widening participation in politics?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. So normally any changes to parliamentary processes, and it's exactly the same here on the council as well, are slow, incremental, involve loads of consultation, and a multitude of voices to try and work out how best to do it. And because of the crisis, we've sort of been thrown into having to quickly find new ways of working. And remote working in Parliament, I don't think is perfect, but I think is a really interesting development. I mean, I've been particularly, I suppose, struck by and in some ways concerned by people like Siobhan Bailey, the new MP for Stroud, had a baby towards the beginning of lockdown. And she received a huge amount of, frankly, abuse for taking a few weeks out with a newborn baby, you know, from constituents concerned that she wasn't doing her role as MP. And so the kind of seeing our politicians as being physically present is a bit of a cultural thing, I think we've all got, and is definitely a parliamentary cultural thing. So the thought of doing anything remotely is a huge challenge.
Do you think Parliament's really set up for men, like Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I think so. The hours, Parliament has really crazy hours. They have votes late into the night, and they work a kind of Monday to Wednesday, Thursday morning, and then in constituencies. And the model, my understanding is that the model was actually developed around MPs who had jobs. So they would go to their job in the morning or the daytime, or have other business interests, and then be able to do their voting in the evening, which is an interesting model. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the theory behind it. So what you've got is this model built around that. And don't forget, many MPs are living in two parts of the country for most of the week. So the job of being an MP is extraordinarily pressured on your family to start with, no matter what. So I think that's the culture, and I think sometimes it's habits, and this is the way we've always done it, is quite a strong pull, and I'm not sure that always comes with malicious intent, but I think the upshot of things is that it makes it difficult. So what we'll end up with, if we never have any flexibility, is politicians who are available at the right times of day. And that's going to count out quite a lot of people. So I think, although it's not been perfect, the remote voting system, and it's been controversial for a number of different reasons. Some people think it's not enough. Some people think it's a little bit too much. People worried about the message that it sends to the country if we're trying to get things moving again. All of those things are kind of valid points, actually. But it's interesting that when things have to be done, actually there can be another way.
And it's interesting the way you said Parliament is set up for people who, like originally, for people who had full-time jobs and were trying to maybe fit in their parliamentary work. What do you think about the idea of job sharing in Parliament? So any one constituency would have, job share, MP participating in job share, and also in local government as well, like councillors job sharing that role as well, in order to open up to mums, dads, carers, people with disabilities who wouldn't normally been able to get involved.
I'm not sure that necessarily job share is quite the right answer. I think it's a tricky thing, because being an elected politician at whatever level you're not an employee. It's not a job. It's completely different. And because the electorate votes for a person to represent them, and that relationship, I think, is quite important. So I'm not convinced that job sharing is the answer to the problem, but I think there could be other answers to the problem. So I think we could extend in Parliament things like the proxy voting system, so that we don't have MPs being wheeled in from hospital to do it. I mean, it's ridiculous, quite frankly. Should never happen. I think if a mum with a new baby or a dad with a new baby is more comfortable taking their baby into Parliament for the vote, brilliant, but they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to. It should be a choice. So I think there are things we can do to make it more family friendly. As a councillor, we're not full-time anyway.
No.
We're part-time. So it actually is, if anyone is thinking of standing in the next local elections, this is the time to be thinking about it, because elections will be taking place over the next year or so. Being a councillor is a brilliant thing to be able to fit around everything, because it's designed to be part-time and to go round whatever else it is you have in life. So I think that's already, we're already doing well there.
I think a lot of people might be put off by being a councillor, because they might think they're going to get shouted at, or maybe they don't have, or they feel they don't have the resilience to deal with angry public, or debating in the council chamber. They feel they may be shy. What do you think about that, if people feel like that?
So I think there's different ways of being involved. Politics is actually quite broad. You can get involved on lots of different levels. You do become a little bit of a local council. We're mini figureheads. We've got a smaller cohort of people. Many residents don't even know who we are. It's slightly less pressured. But yeah, you do need a bit of a thick skin, because you do get, I've been called all kinds of things. And some of them are a bit laughable, and some of them are actually quite hurtful. So it is difficult. It's not for everybody. However, I think there are things we can do. I'm quite concerned about, abuse in politics. I think we do have to keep an eye on that, because I think anything that a little bit of, we should be held to account.
Oh, definitely.
People should be able to criticise what we do, and because that's combined with our views and what we believe, it can feel quite personal. But I think that's right, and that's proper. I think when it tips over into abuse and threatening behaviour, I think we need to be really careful on that, because what we don't want is a situation where people who otherwise would be brilliant at it don't want to because of that. And because that's a threat on democracy. That's not just a threat on those people. So I think there's a balance really there.
You can, have Parliament or local government virtually, and then have all those options. You can go into schools and talk, but then if there's that kind of culture of being abusive or perceived abuse to councillors, that's going to put quite a lot of people off, and maybe make it not as enjoyable as it should be. I think it probably could be quite an enjoyable Well, and earlier you mentioned, I think you were referring to Tulip Sadiq MP when she postponed her C-section to vote in Parliament on Theresa May's Brexit deal. The vote was to take place on Tuesday, the 15th of January 2019, and due to gestational diabetes, she was advised to have a caesarean section at 37 weeks, but the rules meant she couldn't be offered a proxy vote, so she had to be wheeled into Parliament by her husband. How did you feel at that time when you saw her being wheeled into Parliament? Did you think this, enough is enough, and we've got to change things?
Well, I think it has changed things, actually. I think that moment has changed things, and sometimes it takes something like that for people to realise. I think there is a reason why normally procedures, laws, policies, how things work are part of a long process. They involve lots of people, and the reason they have many stages of debate when things are changed is because it's an acknowledgement that it's really difficult for a very small group of people or one person to decide how things should be, because there will always be a curveball incident that they haven't thought of. And I think that moment of seeing her wheeled in has changed things, and has you know, the feeling of we can't have that again, I think has probably fed into some of the way that things have been run recently. I think that's a good thing. And you know, MPs have babies and health issues from time to time, and we should kind of work around that. Anywhere else you work, that's worked around. And so really I think we've got a little bit more to do to make that happen. But I do think these things are not always about bad intent. It's often about just not seeing, which is why enabling more people to get involved is really important, because we need all those different perspectives, and we need those different ways of seeing things, because you don't know what you can't see, you know. So that's, you know, one of the reasons why we're really keen to have this discussion, really.
And you said earlier that you go into schools. We have been into you know, local schools to talk to children and young people. Do you think we should go a bit further in this country and maybe talk to children, young people from nursery, reception, make it like as part of the curriculum, and make sure everybody kind of has a turn, maybe in a youth parliament, or a shadowing, or having maybe work experience with the, you know, like the local mayor or councillors.
I think that's a very interesting idea, actually. So it's a tricky subject, and I think one of the reasons I was listening to a radio programme about a year ago, and they were saying there was a think tank that had counted up all the different things over 12 months that people went on the media, on TV and radio, and said this should be done in schools, and they counted up something like 370 different things, everything from citizenship to financial awareness and cooking, and it's like, well, schools should be able to do this. So I think there's a bit of an issue with like on loading up the curriculum even more, but I think and the other thing is, teaching politics is always a challenge, because it's got to be about civic engagement. What you can't do is be politically biased, I think, in that setting, and it's a really, really, really difficult balance to strike. But it was one of the things that really helped me. So when I was 11, I was in year 7, and my school was twinned with a school in Europe, and this was in the day of the European Commission, so a little while ago. Dates me a little bit. So I was at school, and we had the opportunity to do this is a forerunner of the European Youth Parliament, and they ran it for a week in France. And because our school was twinned with the place that we were going to, they asked our school if we wanted to participate. And my teacher said to me, now I don't think this is anything to do with how brilliant I was at debating at age 11, but she said to me, so Claire, we need somebody to go and do this thing. You just have to sit in a few meetings and say something. You do some talking. If you go, your year group gets a really cheap trip to France. What do you think? So I said, yeah, all right. So I went to this debate thing, and it turns out that me and my friend Tom were representing the United Kingdom, age 11, at this European kids debate thing. And we sat in this room and we did this debate, and I came out thinking, oh, we could have talked about something a bit more interesting. But I realised that I loved it. I really, really loved it. I loved having the discussion. I liked hearing what people thought. It was a real moment of thinking, actually, this is great. Love it. And I think things like that have been really, really helpful. So anything we can do to give young people, because, you know, you'll talk to a whole year group, you know, a group of year 5s, for example, and, you know, most of them will think, that was okay, I didn't have to do assembly, that was fine. And maybe one or two will think, do you know, I'd like to do that. And so it's worth it. Absolutely worth it, because you never know who's going to buy. And they might forget it for years, but it will be there. And so, yeah, I think there are ways of doing it. But I am cautious that schools are really flat out at the moment.
Yeah.
So finding a way that works is quite interesting.
I think it's because when you said, and I have noticed this, a lot of people don't know who their councillors are. They don't know the setup. They don't know, sometimes they don't know when elections are, maybe local elections. Yeah, so I suppose maybe it's kind of trying to get people into the habit of being more interested from an early age, but it's very, very difficult. But I wonder, Claire, have you always been interested in politics, or was that moment that you just described the first time you thought?
No, so that moment was amazing, and then I just kind of left it for a bit. It just sort of settled there for a little bit. So no, so I am kind of mid-career, mid-life, and I've been a councillor for 2.5 years. So it's come, you know, formally standing has been something that's come a bit later. However, yeah, but I've always been involved in community. So I've set up and been involved with communities in across East London. I've helped people do it all over the country. Things like job clubs and early years support, and that stuff that changes people's lives around. And so I think the thing it did for me back then is not necessarily, you know, I didn't even connect it with party politics. I don't come from a politically interested family. It wasn't something, it was always something I thought other people did, not really. It just like, you know, I thought I want to make a proper difference. Don't know what they're all doing. But it was only after years of doing that from that community side that I thought, do you know what, I think I just need to be on the other side of the table, because then I can actually and do some change. And now I balance the two, so I do a little bit of both. But so I think it's a slow burner, but we need that. We need people who come out of university having run their student union and ready to go. We need that. But we also need people who switch mid-career, who have wandered like me at it a roundabout route, that might have different life experience. Lots of councillors actually retired. Yeah, it's something that people find interesting to do later in life. I think we need it all. We need it all, because if we don't, we have a very, very narrow perspective. And I think one of the things we struggle with in Enfield is being able to incorporate all those different points of view, because actually our council is quite flat in terms of age. We're not bad at gender balance, but it isn't, we're not as diverse in terms of, you know, there are groups with fixed opinions. There isn't a lot of mixing between and betwixt, and I think it is something we need to really look at as we go into the next elections, to think, oh, okay, how can we make this better? Because even if you're in opposition, which I am, opposition's helpful. You know, being challenged is the point, and this helps us get towards something different. So I think we've got a little bit of work to do locally as well.
I keep thinking that you should have like hospital matrons and doctors and more teachers in the local council and in Parliament. I think they would find it hard to be full-time parliamentarians in the House of Commons, but maybe councillors.
Well, you can do it in Parliament. So there are rules actually. So if you're a councillor, you can't be employed by the council, and I think that includes schools. So actually, for teachers teaching locally, that is a bit of a legal, because I suppose if you're with one hat on challenging and in the other hat on you're getting paid by them, that makes it a bit tricky. So there is a bit of a legal issue there. But we definitely need a diversity of people. We have a lot of people who are self-employed, because being councillor, being self-employed practically fits. We have retired people. We have people that do it, then that's the thing that they do, and they don't do anything else as well. But it was interesting with the change in going to online meetings in the council, which it didn't happen easily. Myself and a few colleagues were really pushing to get it, because I was concerned that democracy wasn't really going anywhere. So
they just stopped. They stopped.
It just stopped.
Meetings and didn't have it at all for a while.
No, so we had we were due our annual council, which is the big full council meeting that kicks off the municipal year, and from that all the other committees flow. That was due to be had at the beginning of May, and we ended up not having it till July. So that's a massive gap. So it took a lot of lobbying to get there, but we did get there in the end. And I was chatting to one of my colleagues, excuse me, who works, his job takes him off and travelling a little bit. So he is an absolutely fantastic councillor, but he often has to work away and fit it all around. And he was thinking, this is amazing that for the first time he can be as fully involved as he's always wanted to be.
Wow.
And so it isn't just for mums, and it's not just for people who have mobility issues and can't get out and about. Actually, we could have people with city jobs for the first time ever who might not be able to get to a meeting for 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening in Enfield Civic Centre. We have the option of being able to essentially dial into these things. We suddenly vastly open up the pool of people who might be interested in doing this.
Because I can imagine it must feel quite overwhelming. You've got a full-time career, you've probably got a lot of experience, you want to make a difference. But then if you look at the schedule for the council, because I've been to some of the full council meetings, and they're about like 7 o'clock, and then if you've been to work all day and you think, I've got to go to be physically at the full council meeting, that could maybe be off-putting to some people, even if they might be single, they might have children, they might not have children, there might be a carer, they might have a disability, or some people get very overtired because of their medical issues. So that could, as you say, it could open it up to many more people, just having virtual meetings.
Well, and I think it's about the option of. So there is something about being physically there. It's a lot easier to give a speech when you're in the room with people. If you're doing it on a video like this, it's not everybody finds that easy. Some people have issues with technology, they don't really like it that much. Some people's Wi-Fi connection goes down, and when you're in the room physically, you can have all of those little conversations in the corridor, which actually you really need. So there is a real value to having that there. But it's not difficult to have a kind of hybrid system where you can have the option of pulling things in, because I think it's about flexibility. That's the thing that makes a difference. It's not either or, because if you went completely online, you could equally be excluding a whole bunch of other people, and that's not going to solve a problem either. So it's the choice and flexibility, I think, is really key.
I think you're spot on. I think the hybrid idea is perfect, because 1 month you could be there, or 1 week you could be there. Then depending on your schedule, you could then say, actually, I'm going to log in, I'm going to listen to everything that's said, but I'm going to do that virtually, and then return to be there physically. We're coming to the end of the webinar now. It goes so quickly when there's so much to cover. But I just wondered, how do you fit everything into your working? You did homeschooling during COVID, you've got 2 kids, you're doing local politics and all the meetings. How do you schedule your life around everything?
Well, I'd love to say I was really organised, but mainly I paddle like crazy under the water and pretend that everything's fine. And I don't know if there's an easier way if anyone knows an easier way of doing it, let me know. But basically it is, it's crazily busy. But I think when you're doing something you really believe in, it's doable. And I know I'm at a slight disadvantage. So I'll rock up at a meeting and there'll be other people in the room when we've got real ones, and they've gone home from work, they've had a nice dinner, they've had a leisurely drive to the civic centre, and I've picked the kids up, taken to them after school club, come home, done a bit of work, had a scan of my notes, cooked the dinner, got them into bed, the babysitter's arrived, I don't know who they are because they're from the agency and I'm just hoping for the best, run in the car, get to the meeting, rock up and pretend everything's fine. I've just realised I've said that on a Facebook Live and everyone will now know that it feels so. It's a frantic juggle, but I think it's worth it to be involved in this brilliant community that we're in.
And that's the one thing I think when you're at school and then you have careers advice and you've got the teacher saying, come on, you've got to do well in your exams. They don't say, oh, you know, when you're in your late 30s or early 40s or something, you know, if you want to have a full-time career and you want to have kids and then you want to balance that with politics and maybe other interests as well, you're going to have to get a babysitter and you're going to have to do the school run and do the cooking. They don't tell you the reality of life.
No, you just get there and then you manage. And I think that's all anyone, you know, everyone has their own thing, even if it's not family, that, you know, everyone has a something that they're working through. So that's
amazing. And yeah, I can imagine that would make you an extra good counsellor, because you've got the experience of your work, your family, as you can sort of relate to a lot of people. But thank you very much for speaking to us in this short webinar. And if people want to get in touch with you to ask any more questions about becoming a counsellor, maybe going for next local elections or any advice, how do they get in contact with you?
So my council contact details are on the Enfield Council website under the Councillors and Democracy section. Please do get in touch. Even, you know, no matter what your political affiliation, whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, maybe even, especially if you disagree with me, and you want to stand, please, I'll do my best to help wherever I can. So yeah, do get in touch.
Yeah, because you do want people to think about getting involved in the next council elections and in some way. Okay, well, thank you very much, Claire,
thank you
for your time. And yeah, we'll end this webinar now. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.